Hi guys, it's time for our Friday Night Spiritual Insights with Michael Mirdad. I appreciate you joining us. Today we're going to talk about knowing the signs of change. Today we're filming because I'm on tour. What I've done is I have, I think it's nearly 10 sessions each day, and then I also have lectures and workshops during the day. So these days get kind of stacked up. That's kind of how it's always been. So it's something I'm kind of used to, but it's also going to be changing. As I've announced many times, I stopped as much touring. Several years ago, I cut a little bit down. A year or two ago, I cut more down, and now it's to the point where I said I'm probably only going to go to one or two places, and Unity of Dallas, wonderful people there, and I wanted to keep that on the schedule, and now feels like even that's going to come to an end, and this is in context of today's talk. I want to make it clear though, I did say that one reason I stopped touring is because there's no places left to tour. That is to say, there's no places of high caliber integrity and willingness to learn deeply, deep material. And that's true. It really is true. Spiritual conferences have all but faded. Expos that used to be out there are all but gone. It's all gone. All the things that we loved having happen, and back in the 80s, 90s, they started kind of coming forward. It was so cool. Retreats, a lot of yoga retreats have closed down because of improprieties and challenges and scandals, and it's just a weird thing, but it's also relevant and necessary, let's call it. The way I'm going to put that is that first, one of the lessons we can get is we really have to integrate the things we learn. Integrate those things, because like Jesus himself said, you will not have me forever. In a literal sense, you won't always have me here teaching you in the third dimensional body. So you guys have to get what I'm teaching. So these things sort of faded from our lives, but we do have to make them integrated into our being. And you can say, well, we still have books. Books are disappearing now. They became so watered down material-wise, depth-wise. It's just a bummer. And then people thought, well, people will read online books, but you think that's more convenient, and it is, but not everybody wanted to, it turns out, read books online as was predicted or thought. So what ended up happening is people, whether you believe it or not, I've been around and I've seen it and I watched, okay? It's dying. The spirituality is in many respects dying on this planet, and people are not noticing. Those who were out there doing work, or they end up getting pot shots from people, to sort of discredit them. And it's just, this is not an accident. This is the ego's way of removing that which we have, what very little we had compared to the look at the number of hours TV shows are on around the clock with 100 stations in some cases, and how much of it's actually deep. Anything that, and there are some things that are of a deeper nature, but in comparison to what's out there, it's not even 99 to 1%. And now the 1% is sort of being beat up. So I said, look, I've told many centers on the road, you guys have to look at things, man. Things are falling apart here. I hinted and hinted. And some rare few minorities in those centers, they were the minority, tried to speak up. They often got slammed or again discredited, and it became a fight they couldn't do, and not one that I was going to put my nose in other people's business. So I just would see it. People would ask, I'd say, I see it. I would be loving and tactful about it, offer what I could. Some centers asked me to come in and help them straighten themselves out. And I would say of the probably 10 spiritual centers, unity churches, religious science churches, out of the 10 in the last 5 years that had me step in and help, they probably succeeded 90% with the changes I recommended, in the sense that the changes were correct and that made a major difference. But still, when the ego has wrapped itself around like a python, it's going to start choking out the life, of those remain. People tried to do that at our own Unity of Sedona. Ego is going to try to destroy your spiritual path, your spiritual life. And you may or may not see it happening. It could be the voice of one family member. It could be a group of people at a center. This is not an accident. It's very sad and unfortunate. Some have pulled through. Out of the 10 I recommended they follow, 90% of my info worked for these folks. And of those, they still had it cleaned up for a while, and then still had another round of garbage come in and try to destroy things again. That's when I said no more to these centers. That's me making my stand, doing what Jesus said, which is, if they're not getting it, if they're not listening, shake the dust off your from that town off of your shoes and walk, and let those people just implode. That's kind of what he said. And that's what I've done. And yes, they're imploding all over the country. There are centers that are spiritually dying or dead. However, the two that I could still say I love the energy in these places, and I don't have any reason to include them in this group. One of them, Unity of Atlanta. God bless you guys there. Sorry that I'm still not able to come back, because that's the trend, which I'm going to get into a little more in a sec. And Unity of Dallas. It doesn't mean they'll be great 10 years from now or 20 years from now. Who knows the changes that come through centers. But at the time I'm speaking, I really still feel great about the light and the integrity in those two centers. Any other center, if I'm not naming names, it's because there probably are things I've seen that don't feel right. I see fear becoming the predominant guidance for them and so on. And it's unfortunate, but I've made that statement many times. So let those who have ears to hear it. Now, we're talking about seeing the signs of the times. So people are asking me, and like I said, I just announced, even Dallas, that I said I'm going to do my best to keep coming here, and I might still be able to pull it off and come here once a year. Who knows? I would love to do that, but at the same time, there are sometimes logistical issues that get in the way and so forth. So I'm going to do what I can, but changing the times, when seeing the signs of change. This is in your personal life, your spiritual path, your romantic life, health, all these areas. I would take heed. The first book I wrote, The 7 Initiations on the Spiritual Path, from the first time I wrote a book, I was explaining things aren't happening by happenstance or by coincidence and so on. When things are happening, they're part of a message from the universe. And the message is telling us about life's test. That's why that book is subtitled Understanding the Purpose to Life's Test, which would include any changes in life. So then I wrote the book, You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up, to further illustrate when these changes are happening, it tends to mean that parts of your life are going to be, imploding or the rug pulled out, because you're going to have a dismantling. Now, even though I'm teaching that, there are ways to see it coming before it arrives. Then you can ride the wave. It's still a wave. It's neither good nor bad. But you know what? If I don't see a wave coming and it hits me and I'm toppled and drowning or drowned or almost drowning, it doesn't feel like a very positive wave. But really, is it the wave? The wave's just being a wave. Change is just change. Cycles are just cycles sometimes, and yet I'm drowning and I'm coughing and I'm struggling with fear and all that. Because not the wave is the wave, it's because I didn't see it coming. It's so not seeing the signs gets us into far more trouble than just the fact that there's changes in this universe. So people were asking me, Michael, how do you know? How do you know when change is coming? Or how did you know that you're going to go and change because I've announced, I'm changing touring? You have to understand, changing things doesn't mean it always launches into something fantastic. You don't even always, and I don't recommend that you ever just trade in one relationship for another, because that's rebound and it'll look good and oh wow, change was coming, so I just got myself a new relationship. That doesn't ensure that it's a deep or quality-oriented relationship. So what you're going to do, what you're better off doing, is fasting from maybe issues from a first relationship. The fasting period means sometimes things get worse before they get better. So let's not forget that. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. Now, that's not a negative affirmation. Most of the time, they'll get worse before they get better. But it's not because you've done something wrong. That's where the ego is going to say, okay, I'm going to use this worse before it gets better against you to make you believe you've screwed up and done something wrong. Where in fact, what's happening is more likened unto ending an addiction, codependence, or heroin or drinking or whatever it is, when you end an addiction of any kind, a chemistry, one that is biological, one that is emotional, psychological, you go through withdrawals. That's all we mean by it gets worse before it gets better, meaning you're going to have to face deeper issues before you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Many or major versions of the dark night of the soul. See? So there's purpose, there's method to the madness, there's a reason behind all this. But we have to learn to see the signs. And Jesus uses that reference and that metaphor several times in his teachings. But the first thing we have to do, what I do, is before changes come, we are always aware of them on a soul level before they manifest on a material human level. Now, we don't always see them, but that doesn't mean they're not there. They are there. The more tuned in we are, for example, you might get guidance of change in your dreams, in your meditations, spontaneous kind of things, synchronicities, visions or whatever. It'll come to us. For me, I get kind of, it's like a knowingness. Sometimes it's visions, sometimes it's a knowingness. And so it'll be like, sometimes it's even almost like an absurd thought, like, I'm going to stop touring. Like, you have to understand, touring was about 3/4 of my income, livelihood. So to hear that would be like having a really good relationship and then hearing or feeling it's going to come to an end in the next year. You'd be like, wait a minute, what? I mean, why would it do that? It feels great. It's like that. My touring was fine and I'm doing it forever and a day, so I had no major reason, but I started being told that's going to change. And back to it, worse before it gets better, 3/4 of my income gone. That's not an income that anybody else just threw at me. It's not an income that, I teach at Unity of Sedona. They don't have that by any means, not even 10% of that extra on hand. So what am I going to do with that? Well, it's the same as somebody saying, if my relationship ends, what am I going to do? If I have an infected part of my jaw because of a tooth, have the damn thing removed. Yeah, but then I'm going to have it, whatever, it has to be done. So you get something done, no infection, you're going to be better in the end. But right now it's an inconvenience to your reality. Whether it's time at the dentist or costs or whatever, sometimes things still have to be done. So for me, signs of the times. Number one, I get spontaneous insights, visions, guidance of some kind that's somewhat clear, but yet seemingly abstract because there's no context, there's no rhyme or reason, it just comes to me. An example would be 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. I happily had my retreat center up in northern Washington State. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, breathtaking, magical, fairyland. It was just fantastic. The workshops, friendships, everything was just really one thing fed another to make this really a wonderful place. 90% wonderful. Every so often a person or an issue would arise, in workshops or whatever, but it was really 90+% blissful. And one day I was sitting out on my own on the back patio of the main house. We had a hot tub there and I was sitting in there, and all of a sudden it came to me that this could come to an end. There was no reason, there was no hope for that, but it was going to come to an end. And I was like, what? There's no way. And but I saw it, and then you try, and most people will brush things like that off, and then they become victims when it does happen. But I can't just brush it off. I only tried a little bit, but I'm aware that it's there, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me keep an eye on that. Then it comes around again, some more guidance along those lines, and it's like, oh, wow, so what's happening here? And then it becomes more apparent and more apparent. So it became clear that something's changing, and I better be aware. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to just keep open. So if you start getting guidance of a change, you're going to want to wish it weren't happening. Change what you can, accept what you can't. So if you're getting insight something's going to change and there's something you can do about it, by all means, look at that. Maybe you can do something. A change in the relationship might send me to couples counseling, just as an example, so that we could maybe alleviate some of that pressure of that change. But do something if you can, but accept what you cannot. So I kind of went, okay, well, this is kind of abstract, but I'm going to have to stay open. So time goes by and more insights start coming. And at the end of the day, what most people don't realize is that we're not just hoping for and praying and affirming, we're going to be the change we want to see in the world. That's that saying, right? Instead, I'm telling you, we are the change that we see in the world. We're everything we see. We're mirroring everything to ourselves. So when I was hearing that there's going to be a change, yes, sometimes it's God's guidance, for sure. Sometimes we're mirroring things to ourselves. And in this case, I started realizing I have this retreat center and I tour all the time. It was getting to the point, seriously, sometimes 2 months straight on the road, never seeing home, just gone. But it started getting to the point, and the income's great, and the friendships are great, and meeting people and teaching people is wonderful. Healings, oh my God, miracles, wonderful, wonderful. But it got to the point where I'm having to tour to pay the expenses of having a large retreat and land and houses and whatever, this beautiful place for people. It's like, wow. And we don't like to see things like that. We don't like to see that the challenge or wave of change that's coming is sometimes because there are things there that aren't as peaceful as we'd like. The payments I was having to make were not blissful. They were pretty high, and the high expenses. So I was having to tour. See, but it happens so insidiously you don't often see it. And so things slip by, and then you realize, wow, I got into a relationship, and now I'm with somebody that's maybe horrible, but we have children, so I have to stay. That's a very challenging, between a rock and a hard place kind of, state to be in. So I had to look at it and go, okay, now I see why I'm hearing there's probably a change coming. It's not a bad thing. It feels bad because I might be not having a center. But I wasn't told I'm going to lose the center, and I didn't lose it. It never happened in a negative way because I stepped in and started riding the wave. A change is coming. Oh, you're kidding. Wow. But I love this place. No, wait a minute. I do love the place, but I don't love the feeling of the debts that go with it and the pressure of touring. But here's the last piece to that, the sort of the third strike, and that is I never even got to see the retreat. I loved it, but never got to see it because I'm on the road. That is important to remember, just like a relationship. I'm really glad that I have this relationship. God, it's been 30 years, but wait, we haven't talked in 20. It's kind of like that, is all of a sudden you go, wow, now I need to start recognizing and owning that there are problems I didn't want to see. So as much as I loved the retreat, I had to stay open. Next thing you know, the people on tour, touring it once again and again and again, and then I stopped in Sedona, Arizona to tour, and which I did once a year, and the people there said, can you be our spiritual leader? And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I realized that's why my first point, the original, seemingly abstract guidance, a change is coming. So Spirit already knew, orchestrated this whole thing, and my soul got on board with that and said, I get it. It's my teaching's going to shift, so I shifted to Sedona. And the good news is it didn't have to be deathly and dramatic. I got to go to Sedona, but they allowed me 1 week per month to go on tour still. So I got to sort of a happy medium. That's always beautiful when you can make changes you can, accept what you can't, but the ones you can make sometimes are win-win scenarios. That's really beautiful and balanced. And I did that for several years until now, hearing new guidance that's going to end, which is just as shocking and dramatic as me hearing that I'm going to lose or let go of my retreat center. Stop touring? There's no way. And here it is. I'm in the midst of it now. Changes. So number one, watch for these sometimes seemingly abstract messages, and instead of brushing them off, I'm not saying you should completely take them on and invest as though they're 100% certain, because guidance can sometimes be abstract or not make sense for a while. You may not know all the pieces to it. So number one, watch for the signs, the synchronicities, the visions, and so on. Secondly, when the guidance comes, I then start noticing, this is typical for any of us, but for me, I start watching for not only the abstract visions, but doors that start opening and closing. For example, I get this feeling tours might be changing. Then I start watching and hearing and noticing spiritual centers closing their doors, saying, and literally, many of them are saying, we're going to go back to old ways, old principles, which they think is fantastic. We're going to go back to old core principles that they're sort of thinking is their spiritual depth and foundation. It's not. They're going back to old rules and regulations. They're going back to old-fashioned. So they're not new thought churches. They're not new age spirituality. They're old school. And so, but that's their version of what they think is right or safe. Unfortunately, it starves all the children on the end of the vine, the fruits on the end of the vine that started saying, yes, we're the flowers coming forward in this new age of life. They're all left to die because someone decided to cut everything back to the ground, raising everything to the ground. It's a funny phrase people use, which is raise things to the ground. It's not spelled like raising, rising. It's raise it like cut it, like a razor. So you chop everything to the ground, and that's what a lot of these places have done. So I watch for doors opening and closing. It's almost like saying validating my original visions. So part 2, step 2, watch for doors opening and closing. Then the third thing I do is what I call test the spirits. In my mastery workshops, I teach that a lot too, but test the spirits, sort of move it a little bit, shake it up a little bit to see. Now I'm validating the second step. I'm validating the doors opening and closing. I'm now not only watching for doors opening and closing. In step 3, I'm actually knocking on some of the doors to see if they open. I put it to the test. Jesus calls it test the spirits. So the spirit of a guidance, I'm going to test it to see, is this going this way? So I literally might say to a spiritual center, I think this will be my last time here, and I watch the response. The response could be, hugely, no. There was one spiritual center that did that I said, I'm probably not coming back. No, don't do that. And I watch and I go, okay, so there's some life there. There's still some Christy energy there that likes the Christy energy in me. We're going to buddy up and we're going to get this right. And I continued going again for another year. But that's all that's all that was there. It's almost like resuscitating something. And sometimes they can come back to life. Sometimes you try to resuscitate something and it looks like it's coming back, and it absolutely goes. So you do what you can on the spiritual CPR, communication CPR, but you realize they're gone. Clear, poof, you try it, and it, beep, it looks for a second like they're back, but they're not. And so that's kind of a strange metaphor that I just throwing out there that explains some of what I do. I do that in partnership. I do that in friendships. I test to see if something's as far gone as it seems. I've done that, I can remember, all the way back to at least high school, if not further back. Seeing things changing, testing it a little bit to see how serious they are as a intimate friend or as a friend. Test it, put it, I just would put things out there to see what would come back. And that really was a good way to know, are people what they say they are, or are situations really done? Whatever the case may be, throw things out there. So that's kind of my version of knocking on the doors to see if any of them open, testing the spirits, and it's to me, it's all about really running a safe test, doing something where everybody can still remain safe. It's not like you're doing something drastic or hurtful in any way. You're just testing things out a little bit. So that's what I would do. I would say often to my team, I might say, I think we're not going to do, let's say, Friday videos anymore, or we're not going to do videotapes and sets anymore, or I don't think I'm going to write any more books, or whatever. I might throw something out like that to see what comes back. And if I see like people don't care, that validates, so imagine you're in a partnership and you say to your partner, I would like us to do some relationships seminar, workshop, or whatever. And you put that and they go, yeah, okay, whatever. And you go, no, what I mean is I would like us to do that, because if we don't, I feel like we might be done. Now picture this, guys. And they go, whatever. I'd be like, oh, crap. I think I just saw that we are done. Your lack of, like, instead of, God, that's a great idea, then I'd be like, wow, you're in it too. You're wanting this too. When I see a dead response, it tells me it's done. There are slight exceptions to that rule, but it's there. Once in a while, like, for example, I just announced in Dallas, guys, I don't think I'll be coming back. I'll try, but I might not be coming back after the last year being only Dallas. And they're like, wow. Some are like, please come back. Some are like, I get it. But overall, there wasn't this overwhelming, please come back. Not because, and this is an exception to the rule. In their case, it wasn't, they weren't wanting me back. I could tell they were getting it. They were actually feeling that there's a change, and they got it, and they accepted it. So there was a beautiful, please, come on, man, please keep coming back. But there was also a, we get it. You're just wonderful, and thank you, and we're here if you want to come back. So there was this balance thing. Had they said, please, 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 I would have probably tried to come back more than I will now. But there was this depth. If there would have been a coldness, I would have definitely not been interested in coming back. But this is one of the rare exceptions. It's somewhere in between, and it was nice and it was warm. It wasn't, you must come back. It wasn't, we don't care. It was a warm something, vibe. And I took that to be, okay, wow. So it's confirming this is actually very much right. And they were confirming it in a beautiful, warm way. So, I would just say there's a couple last pieces I want to add to this. And I would ask myself, if I were you, these are like three main signs of change, what to do about it. But there's a couple last pieces. To know, can I make any changes to this? Is this real? Is this really going to happen? Or can I make any changes? If I were you, I would ask myself, are there any lessons here? I mean, if a change is coming, if I am going to move out of my retreat center, if I am going to stop touring, I don't just go, well, it's being done to me, Spirit's telling me. I also would recommend, as a footnote, number one footnote, also ask yourself, are there any lessons or karma or anything like that? Is this coming to an end because I've done something, wrong? Because I wasn't, I let my team become too lazy and not make phone calls and get things scheduled. Did we make poor communications with spiritual centers that we could have kept good relations with? Or did they really dry up like it looked like? I would always be willing to look at our part to see if there's anything that can be changed still. So think about that. Don't just say, well, I'm going to test my relationship and then make it done. Also, maybe you weren't talking, maybe you weren't communicating, maybe you weren't being affectionate and so on. So look at your part, because if you change your part, it might put life back into whatever it is that's changing. So don't just blame Spirit and say, Spirit's telling me I need to drop something. Be willing to change what you can first. Do what you can to bring life back into it before you have to accept that loss. I would also ask myself, footnote number 2, is, do I have any fears or inhibitions, to going on here? In other words, there's some changes coming. Do I have fears about that? Do I have inhibitions? Because if Spirit is in fact telling you about a change in your life, are you deeply, knowingly or unknowingly inhibited about those changes? Be honest about those things, because if that starts to come up, that can sabotage the changes that are coming, okay? Coming down the line. I would say, look, I'm going to change what I can, accept what I can, and I would watch for. And it's not easy to, it wasn't easy for me to go, okay, wow, okay, I changed my retreats. That wasn't feeling easy. Oh, I'm going to move to the desert. I was living in the beautiful, lush Northwest. I wasn't like, I can't wait. One day I hope to move to the desert. These weren't things I was consciously hoping for, but they're things Spirit knew and my soul knew. These are actually the next right move for you, and it will turn out great, but you'll still feel the angst of a retreat going away. And I will say this to you, footnote number 3, that once you do make the changes, 90% of the time you will say, I should have done this sooner. Because when you get on board with that wave, it almost always turns out beautifully. It's our fears and inhibitions, it's our unhealed karma, the footnotes number 1 and 2, that get in the way and screw things up, sabotage that greater good, that new life. It's our mistaken decisions. You might have a guidance to end a relationship, but then you blow it and jump into one kind of rashly or vengefully, hatefully, fearfully, lustfully, or whatever. And with that will come consequences. Not God punishing us, simply our soul saying, wow, we had a chance for a really clean move into something beautiful, and you settled for something else. And with that, with settling comes settled, less, bargained, and lesser than you could have had. So as I'm already going to come to a close here, because again we have we completed the topic, but sessions and sessions and classes and things are still stacked for the day. So just my heart goes out to anybody that is in the midst of change that you didn't expect or that seems a little unsettling. But again, it's not too late. You might have missed the first step cues. Remember the first step, those visions and guidances. You might have missed those, but it's actually not too late to still get some of those. You might have missed some initial ones, but even for me, hindsight still works in spirituality. So I can look back and go, oh, okay, wait. Oh, that's right. There was this vision. There was a dream. There was a synchronicity. Okay, let me go back and do some reconnaissance there and pick up some pieces of that, pull that together, bring it to the present, and see if that might help me with current decisions. A lot of times that still works to bring up, resuscitate some of those messages, bring them to the present, and see there's some rhyme and reason now. It's kind of coming together, so that does work. All right, and it's funny because it's not just on topics of major changes in your own life. This happens for me in all kinds of topics. It's happened. I'm not even into it. Could be music, certain types of music. Somebody could mention a name of a musician in a form of music that I'm not even into, and it'll come to me. That person's career is going to launch, or that person's career is going to crumble. Just like when I'm doing private sessions with you guys. I get the insights and I share them, and they're usually correct. And it happens even strange things like in sports. I can see, and I've told people, wow, that team, they're going to become dangerous to other teams. They're going to become really good. They're something's happening. And the sportscasters, they just ramble and ramble. That's their job. Make even the worst teams sound like they're good, just to always make it sound like any team could win today, when they know that it's probably going to be this team's going to wipe that team out. They can't say that usually. They'll try to make it like there's something really great going on, and be sure to tune in because this is going to be a great game. They have to sell things. And then lastly, the thing with politics. In fact, I just had a major vision 3 days ago. I'm not even into politics, but sometimes you're plugging into the Akashic living records, and living means that they're always morphing. And this whole download of some things that are going to be happening soon politically. I was shown endings of certain political people. I saw beginnings of political people. I was shown events held at the White House, celebrations, parties. All this stuff I'm not even interested in, but it's not always you're plugging into your own guidance. Sometimes you're plugging into the collective and the Akashic in general, so you're sort of picking up change. So in closing, again, signs of the times. Learning to watch, listen to, read, but apply signs of the times. Don't just pick them up. Also learn how to integrate and apply them into your life in any way you might be able to, if it applies some way on a practical level. I'm seeing all these political things days ago that I don't at all watch news, but I'm seeing things that'll be coming in the next year or two, and I'm shown all this. I don't have any third dimensional practical application consciously that I know of, but I stay open that it might have a relevance. For example, I just spewed that out in this talk. So that might be the only relevance, but it might be relevant to some of you and going, yes, okay, cool, and validating some of the things you're getting. It could be about natural disasters. We pick these things up and go, what was that? A month later, there's a natural disaster, but we don't remember to put the two things together. So we think that was random, we don't even tie it together. If you learn to make those connections, more will be given. I'm not saying overanalyze the events, but I'm saying that it happens where more will be given. You'll start to, your soul will start to say, wow, you're getting good at this connecting pieces, so let's start bringing you more, and you start maybe becoming a more professional psychic, or just simply someone that people can rely on for feedback or information, like you guys often do with me in sessions or classes or whatever. So I very much appreciate you tuning in, and I pray this is going to make a big difference in your life. I know it will if you apply it. I know it, and it does in my own. And again, change is coming, and they're not always ones that seem like we're in favor of, but it's a wave. Ride it the best you can. Integrate the changes, learn what you can, move with the changes, and remember to give thanks for the changes, even the ones you resisted. Give thanks because you at least received them, and now you'll get better and better at getting changes, feedback, the winds of change before they knock you over. So therefore you can ride that wave, or you could ride that current up in the sky, if you're hang gliding or whatever as a metaphor, okay? Thank you so much, guys. Many blessings. God bless you all. Peace be with you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.